Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm Jessica Tarlov. Scott and I talk a lot about politics, of course, and tangentially the impact it has on culture and vice versa. Today, I'm joined by Wesley Morris, who's been thinking, writing, and podcasting about culture for decades. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning critic at the New York Times, and in fact, he's the only person to have ever won the Pulitzer Prize for criticism twice. He's also a great friend, and I'm thrilled to have him here. Thank you for joining me, Wesley.
I cannot believe I'm on this show.
Is it like career achievement, the better than the Pulitzer? Or
it's just like I'm sitting in your living room 1 minute and now I'm sitting in my kitchen talking to you on your show.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for doing it.
It's an honor
and weird to have a show.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I have so many directions that I wanted to go, but I probably spent more time prepping for this than I have for any other guest because I wanted to make sure that I hit all the beats properly. But I was re-listening to your episode of Still Processing from after the 2016 election.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Well, oh, no for the world, but oh, yes for our conversation. And you and your co-host, Jenna Wortham, are crying in this episode. And it's so raw and it's so emotional. And I was curious to know how you felt recording it, and it was widely shared, and what the aftermath of that looked like. And then I want to bring it to Trump's reelection, which felt so markedly different, right? There was almost no emotionality to it at all. We all just said like, oh, that sucks, and got on with the rest of our Tuesday. I mean, it was declared Tuesday night, and then Wednesday just happened. It wasn't a day where people were crying in their offices. Could you take me through it all?
We had just launched that show. I think that might have been our 6th episode, our 5th episode. And, I'll just speak for me. Jay probably would agree with me. But I had like 2 qualifications for president for a long time. And they were, what happens when this person gets off a plane in somebody else's country? And are they a racist?
Low bar.
This person failed both those tests, right? Like, I just didn't want to see what happens when this guy goes to a state dinner. And I definitely had plenty of proof that this person's also a racist. But like the thing that he brought with him, that he was going to bring with him to the White House, was going to be an assortment of racisms, right? Like, Trump is kind of like, he's always got plausible deniability with everything. It's always there's always a veil over the way he talks about non-white people. Whereas, some of the people that came with him were almost certainly not going to have a veil. Some of the people who were aligned with him weren't going to have the same thing. And I think the thing that really brought the tears was, it was a proof of a thing that as Black people, as gay people, you just know is true about this place, and to have it entering the highest office in the land. And again, like bringing with it to the agencies, to these staff positions, all of these sort of dark forces that are really hard to undo. I don't know. It was just really is upsetting. And I also think that it wasn't really just about Donald Trump in that moment. It was really about the whole stress of that campaign. I don't know, you're probably, it's probably stressful for you too, in some way.
Yeah, it was my first rodeo working in conservative media, and I loved her, and I fit the perfect demo who would love her, like an overeducated white woman. People disliked her in a way that I didn't fathom until she lost. Like, I knew she wasn't like, quote unquote, likable, but I did not know that she was so unlikable that Donald Trump could become president.
I think so you were going through the same thing that we were going through, right?
Yeah.
which
totally.
was, okay, these are your options. And even if you just like roll out your carpet on your Hillary Clinton issues, sure, fine, whatever. But at the end of the day, when I think of like what a president is, can be, should be, could possibly do once they get elected, It's like there's never been a more presidential candidate than Hillary Clinton, right? Just like textbook president. Like the only place you would find somebody who fit the bill in art is the movies, right? Like a Hillary Clinton would be president in every single action movie that needed a president to do so. I think what was wild to me was I wasn't surprised that he won. There was a moral equivalency that also seemed, if you in that war, in that political zone, to have taken hold, and it made it really hard to see the reality of what the stakes were. This was the moment in which everything changed, and you could no longer pretend that conventional political coverage was going to cut it for this person. Crying for a lot of shit that day. Part of it was Hillary, part of it was him, part of it was 400 years, part of it was what the future was going to look like. Part of it was that there are enough people who did not want to live in the reality 2016. That was also kind of demoralizing. I mean, I was just thinking about going through the airport. Like, what's it gonna be like to go through an airport now and see all these MAGA hats? Because MAGA at that time was still like, to me, those hats were scary for the energy that they kicked up and like the swagger of the people who wore them. Um, it wasn't rappers at that time, right? It was January 6thers.
I mean, and I want to talk about the change in kind of like beauty standards that are going on, or just the way that culture looks now that MAGA is so mainstreamed, but
Totally different. Yeah.
totally different. I mean, you walk around, we both live in New York City, you walk around the West Village, you see MAGA hats now on 28-year-old dudes, right, that are going to pick up girls at Dune or whatever. And
Or whatever.
or whatever, whatever they're doing. But I'm curious as to, before we get to that, I've been overwhelmed, and not in the I'm going to start crying sense, but just like deeply unsettled and sad that politics doesn't seem to mean as much to people as it did in 2016. Been broken in us. And
Mhm.
we won't get, I mean, maybe we won't get a Barack Obama again generally, but you will not get that outpouring of emotion, not only here in the United States, but worldwide, if you elect somebody like that again, because something has been cauterized almost inside of us. So we won't allow ourselves to feel as deeply anymore. And I felt that for the 2024 election, where it was just
Mhm.
business as usual. And a lot of that was that the win was predicted, and people, the Biden stuff and the Kamala stuff. But what do you make of that as a kind of a statement about where culture is? That politics is now something for the folks that engage in politics, but it's not mainstream on the left anymore.
Oh, you know what's funny? Um, you mentioned the MAGA hats in the West Village. And I have been thinking about the other hats that I know you've seen, which are basically those hunting and fishing caps, right? It's got that hunting fishing camo,
Mhm.
not military colors, but doing that just so you're able to, like, hide
And the
yourself when you're
vibe.
hunting
Yeah.
for deer or whatever. That design scheme is on so many different things, worn by so many different people, and nobody's really thinking about what it signifies. But it is a proof to me of a cultural shift that nobody's really acknowledging as even having shifted. But previously, if you were to see somebody wearing one of those hunter fisher caps in New York City, you would have instantly assumed this person was visiting from somewhere else. But now that's now just a fashion item. It's not even a statement. It is almost axiomatic that if you're going to put on a hat, it's going to be one of three things, and that design is one of the three things. I think that politics is now popular culture. I understand your question 100%, like inside and out. Like, it does seem that an aspect of our appetite for politics has been diminished, mostly through fatigue, I think. Mostly because of this thing that I'm also identifying, which is this move into looking at this particular person in Donald Trump and, the drama that he brings with him everywhere he goes, and like the sort of barrage in our attention, and our willingness to give our attention to it, or its ability to sort of seize our attention is maybe the better way to put it. I think that, we're talking about a person who is very good at turning politics into entertainment. There's a conventional way of thinking about how to recapture people's interest. I think that because the right has done such a effective job of changing the lingua francas of how candidates get their messages out, how people consume information and get information, that there has to be a tat for their tit on the left. And people have like pointed to somebody like Hassan Piker as being an answer to Joe Rogan. I think things are so broken, to your point, and so cauterized that there is going to be no precedent for the antidote to whatever we're currently in, unless it's a war. Unless it's like a world war or a civil war. But that's the only normal thing I can think.
I feel like we've actually probably talked about this, but I certainly have with other, Democratic-leaning people, that it feels as if there is a war coming, and the problem is we don't know how to use guns as liberals. That we're gonna be walking around with, like, nice handbags or whatever and a cell phone and saying, "Back off." And that's concerning to me. I had my first close friend who lives in New York City, has 2 young children, who said that he would feel safer if he had a gun at home. And this is someone who you would never offline, I will tell you who I'm talking about. That stunned me, and what stunned me even more is that I completely understood the sentiment.
I should say, like, I am here as neither a Democrat nor a Republican, but as a person who is just looking at this stuff and having feelings and thoughts about it. I think about all the data that came out in the last, like, maybe 2 or 3 years. Maybe it was during the pandemic even, where people, like all kinds of different people, Black women were the things were who stood out to me as people going to go get trained to use guns. A lot of firearm sales went up, or firearm sales went up a lot. There are lots of these photos of people going to these shooting ranges to get trained, and how to use firearms. And I just really, they were all living in the suburbs. A lot of these people, they weren't living in cities. I think that there was, and it created this sense that something cataclysmic was about to happen. And my memory of when this is a little fuzzy, but it was definitely sometime between the pandemic and Biden's election.
Yeah, it totally tracks. I know about the bump in the data, but it was end of times feeling like you thought that you were in a show, right? That there are mobile morgues around and people are
Oh
calling
my
in
God, the mobile
nurses,
morgues.
right, from all over the country are showing up. It reminded me growing up in the city during 9/11 when we had firefighters that descended upon the city from every corner of the country to come and help. And we had this national moment that was rooted in something completely frightening that none of us understood. And in a weird way, there's all the scary stuff that's associated with it as well. But it did feel like we were one country for
I was
a
gonna
little
say
while.
that was a happy
That part of
convergence
it
of,
was. There
yeah.
was a nationalism that we could all agree upon, which was a good thing. But we already dipped into the caps, and it's interesting about the hunting and fishing caps. And I find that this change, I guess MAGA beauty standards is maybe the right way to talk about it. But I don't have it. Whatever it is, it's a lot of matte makeup,
Well, you're
huge
not
eyelash.
blonde for one thing.
No, I'm not. I'm continuing to fight as the dark-haired representation on Fox News. But, it's a heavy makeup, the big cross that a lot of these women wear, certainly the White House officials. And you're seeing it also generalized to folks that you're seeing around. It's all over TikTok, obviously, Instagram, et cetera. What do you make of this shift? Because I feel like a lot of trends were usually happening on the left, and it feels at this moment that the right is just having so much cultural dominance. Like, we're receding from the culture challenge, or we're doing it ourselves. And I read your piece about Sinners and the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl halftime show and Beyonce. And these are all people or artists that are making a political statement, but they're not doing it in the political arena, right? Like, they wouldn't be caught dead doing that necessarily at a Kamala rally or
Right.
something like that. They're going their own way because culture and politics and formal politics has detached. What do you make of the fact that the right is having this cultural renaissance moment while we're, and I say, I know that you're not a partisan this way, but me as a partisan, while we're kind of adrift?
Well, I mean, wait, can we talk about the beauty standard for a second?
Yeah, sorry, that was like 80 questions in one, but
Because
everything is linked
they're
somehow in my
connected, though.
head.
They're connected. One of the things that's really striking to me, and I don't know exactly what I mean when I say this, there is this masculine energy that everybody has access to. Because there's something to me about the trad wife phenomenon, the idea that women are supposed to serve men, right? I mean, there's no other real way to understand this conception that the women have a very specific purpose, and it is not to go to work. It's to do this other thing, which is to like propagate to keep the race alive. And I mean, the white race. And so there's this sort of masculinist energy that like has made its way into these health considerations, into this obsession with fitness, aggressive stance that people in the administration and around the administration have taken that they've basically absorbed from outside the culture, right? I mean, outside political culture. And this is what I'm saying about this like convergence of these two arenas. I mean, one of the first things Trump did after the election was go to an MMA fight, right? There are people going to UFC fights. Kash Patel's a big UFC person. Dan Bongino is in the FBI. You're gonna laugh when I say this. I'm thinking about all the bellwethers for this too. People like Michael Grimm. He's not in politics, I think, for corruption-oriented reasons. But this is a person who beat up a journalist. I think in the Capitol, like he like got aggressive with a reporter somewhere. He didn't get in trouble for that, but he definitely had to apologize for it. But there was this masculinist energy around conservative politics fairly, it's not old, the energy. But now it's sort of in charge of everything. And I think that in the same way that Rambo has kind of been misunderstood as this sort of masculine American symbol, and now that Stallone has essentially renounced what Rambo stood for by aligning himself with Trump. I mean, you've got all these old action stars in his orbit.
Yeah.
There's something about like everybody's wanting to be fit that's sort of just very conventional ideas of.
Well, RFK Jr. doing workout competitions, right? During the campaign, even wearing jeans, but topless and having a very nice physique, certainly for a man of 70.
Yeah, and I think that there is, and all the memes of Trump, like having RFK's body, essentially, having Schwarzenegger's body. But like, I do feel like, I mean, wait, I'm just going to ask you this. What do you think about the cobalt, those rings, those steel, those carbon rings, those black, wedding
As
bands?
wedding bands or the
Yeah,
Aura ring?
as wedding bands.
Oh, I'm very anti. Sorry to any listeners I'm offending with that, but
Well,
I do not enjoy it as a trend. I'm not saying it has to be a plain gold band. You
no,
do
you can
you,
do
but
whatever you want, but
totally. But it's weird how it seemed like you just woke up one day and everyone kind of, let's say 30 to 45, 30, 45-year-old men were wearing that as their band, which to me doesn't signify in the traditional sense, I'm married and want to wear a band. It looks like this is either cool, maybe it's telling me about my REM cycle, and I'm not doing the conventional thing. Like, this is not my dad's marriage, or this is not my grandfather's marriage.
you agree a little bit with me. I think I would go a step further and say I'm glad you
You
noticed it for
always
one thing.
go a step. Yes, I notice that a lot.
I feel like it is such a rejection of the of a presumption of gold as an effeminate signifier.
Oh, this is why you're a critic of the New York Times and I host this podcast. Yeah, that's a deeper thinking than I
I've
had.
just been thinking about it, and also what it says to me, because you'll notice that, I mean, I have never seen a heterosexual. I've seen two women have those rings. I've never seen a woman married to a man. Like, if you just do a study of people walking through airports, every person I see with one of those rings is a man, and you never see a corresponding ring on his spouse. I can only deduce that these men are all married to each other, right? This is like a club that you are part of, whether you think you're joining a club or not. You're definitely choosing to make a statement, whether you know it or not, by having one of those rings. Because it's not like I actually have never surveyed women about this, but I don't know that they were they given the option to not wear one?
I think that you're right, that this is a trend that took off just for half the species, and did not take the other half with it.
They're a more masculine option that also happens to be cheap. I think they're probably cheaper to stay competitive with gold, right? Or to stay, to keep gold out of the competition. But I also think there's something military about them. Like, there's something,
Like your caps?
yeah, a little bit. Because we've been watching since 9/11, the military sort of creep into most of our culture at this point, right? I mean, from Beyonce's Super Bowl halftime performance, well, it wasn't even hers. She stole Coldplay's. That moment when Formation happened and she showed up basically as a Black Panther. Um, I feel like it's been all over the culture in one way or another. And it's only gotten more enhanced and more subtle, I would say, in these 25 years or 24 years. Um, and there's something about those rings to me that just really, they kind of say a lot about men and men's relationships to each other, men's relationship or non-relationship to women. I have this theory that you may or may not know about, men cursed to be straight. Um,
I don't know
where
about that one.
men love men so much, but they're just not gay. And they would really, really, really probably prefer if they were gay in some way, because it just means you don't have to deal with women in the same way.
We're pretty
And
awful. Yeah.
I mean, it's misogyny. It's the purest form of misogyny. You have the curse of being attracted to women sexually, but you abhor them socially. You don't want to talk to them. You don't want to listen to them. You don't want to share mind space with them. They are not your equals. They are just a receptacle for your penis. Um, I think that cadre of man is very apparent in our culture, right? And those rings, to me, fairly or unfairly, are such a signifier of that. Because have you heard from
Mhm.
Cheryl Hines? Has Cheryl said anything?
No. I think she does not look like herself, to say the least.
Right. I mean, I don't know what kind of ring RFK has. That's really kind of not my point. It's just what the ring
It
signifies
definitely
about
has
the
to be like
individual woman.
an aura ring. Or a lot of boomer men don't wear rings at all. Like my dad didn't wear a ring,
Really?
and very few of his friends did.
Hmm.
No.
Hmm.
That definitely comes in ebbs and flows. It's always shifting.
I mean, it's funny because so much of women's participation in this movement, because it's dominated by these very performatively masculine men, and they wind up serving, like, working at the behest of them, right? I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, this obsession against trans people, and this like need to declare that we have two genders and two genders only, and then to actively work to eliminate these people from all walks of our lives. Uh, that is a sort of psychotic insecurity to me. We are working out in real time with very little science to help us, um, how we feel about our own gender with respect, like, while displacing that insecurity on to an oppressed group of people who are just trying to live their lives. It's all sort of bound up in these displays of in these what I would call gender displays, essentially.
Do you see any validity in the argument that trans people who are undoubtedly a persecuted minority, and when you get down to the numbers of people, especially trans athletes in competitive sports, they had the head of the NCAA testifying, and we're talking about like 10 people, but that the left elevated the concerns of such a tiny group to an outsized proportion, and then the right, the pendulum is always swinging, right, between these overreactions. And I know that there are a lot of people who are on the left and very supportive of trans rights who feel that we actually were, to some degree, responsible for shining a spotlight on a group that just wanted to, as you said, like go about their business, right? Like live their lives, find themselves, same thing as us that want a good job, want to find love, have a family.
I think what you're identifying though is that elevation probably, that was at a time when the culture was different,
Mhm.
right? I mean, just thinking back to the arrival of Laverne Cox and Caitlyn Jenner's coming out,
Yeah.
the things were just different then. And I think, what I mean, I can't speak for the trans community, but I would say that like an important part of that elevation and that prominence was about the securing of rights to like protective rights, human rights, civil rights, to make sure that they had jobs they could keep,
Yeah.
to make sure they could start families the same way that everybody else, a variety of federal support, um, and state-backed support. I think that there was a real determination to make sure the system was positively responsive to them and their needs. I think that the reaction against that is to me not dissimilar from the reactions against all things that aren't in favor of or benefiting exclusively cis, heterosexual, white aligned people. Because I'm just going to say parenthetically, whiteness is both a race and a feeling. You don't have to be white to be white. The right's reaction to, or conservatives' reaction to, the demand and the inscription of rights for trans people was somehow just like unfathomable to them because they never had a say. And I will say that never had a say in terms of being able to give rights or consecrate rights for trans people. But I will also say that, to your point about the numbers, I think the thing that made gay marriage possible was that at some point there were enough gay people in enough different people's lives
Yes.
to make empathy a real factor here.
Well, and to also make it not politically toxic to jump on board. Like that's how Barack Obama got swung over by
Right,
Biden,
right,
frankly.
right, right. I think that numbers are a huge part of this. And, I'd like to see where we are in 5 years. Um, I'm not saying this is not in any way to say stop fighting for trans rights. I'm just saying I wonder how much harder or easier that fight's going to look like with more out trans people.
Hopefully better. And I
Hopefully
think
better.
that, yeah, and that folks learn how to manage such an important issue more strategically. And that doesn't mean anything about diminishing
What
the
does
rights
that
of
mean
people.
to you, though, the managing it more strategically?
I think from a political strategist point of view, I think that when you look back at the election and you see the Charlemagne the God ad, right, where he is talking about how Kamala is for transgender
Oh,
surgeries for
yeah,
undocumented
yeah.
people in prison. And that is the most persuasive ad from the cycle, bar none. Right. Seen by the most people. It was every football game, right? You were going to see it multiple times. And the level of impact. And I should note, well, two things. One, it was inaccurate. I mean, that comes from an ACLU survey that she signed, and that there was gender affirming care that went on in the prison system under Donald Trump. But of course, no one bothers
Right.
to know
It
anything
wouldn't
about
even
that.
matter now if that were made explicitly clear.
I've tried multiple times. Nobody
Nobody's
cares.
listening.
But what mattered the most about that ad is it was actually about the economy, right? Because it was about your tax dollars are
Yeah,
being
that's
spent
smart.
on
That's
this
smart.
thing
That's
that you
smart.
don't
That's
care
smart.
about,
Mhm.
right? And going back to the North Carolina bathroom bill, we saw how little people do care about it. Just like, go about your business. Go to the bathroom. I'm not thinking about it. And the right was able to seize on a culture war issue that was important to everyone because it became an economic issue. And then, to my mind, they always elevate these tiny bits of truth or this tiny kernel of bad feelings or hate, whatever it is, and then they make it the most important issue. And you see that even in the data that's coming in today, focus groups that are happening about, what Kamala Harris stood for. And she actually had the most ads about the economy. She had the most important ads about the economy talking about price gouging. Now, Donald Trump sounds like Kamala Harris today, right? The
Right.
way he's
Right.
saying to
Right.
Walmart, don't you dare do that, right? Or talking about building housing, et cetera. But no one cares because, they were watching NFL football and they saw Charlemagne kind of losing his mind about this. And I'm curious, I actually don't know if he's spoken about the impact of it. That would be interesting to talk to him about.
I've never heard him bring it up. He's
Right?
on to
Because
some other things now.
yes, he's definitely on to other things, but it's weird. We all play a role, right, in the overarching narrative of what happened to some degree. Right? You from your perch, me, I'm on election night coverage, which is one of the most surreal and coolest things in the entire world. And so we're all players, right, in what's going on. But to be the central figure in the most pivotal ad.
He's a great talker, as you know. I mean,
He's amazing. Yeah.
he's very open to all questions, and will entertain and consider all questions. I think that's a real thing to ask. He probably is. I don't listen every day, but he could have addressed it. But I think it's like this is a great subject for the two of you and Scott. Hi Scott, when Scott's back, to think about, just because, or to ask him about. I just think that, I don't know, I hadn't thought about it that way. How he might be feeling. And I'm sorry about that, Charlemagne, but you've made me wonder now, Jesse, how this man might be feeling about
Well,
his role.
there was a cease and desist that came out. I don't know about the post-election chat about it, but there was.
But it was effective. But it was effective. It was
Right. And that's the
demonstrably
problem with how fast culture moves, is that it just getting it out there. Like, you see this, I don't know if you're on Twitter or X, or you've absconded to bluer pastures, or you just
I
don't
don't do
care, but
anything anymore.
nothing. Okay. So
Nothing.
I still hang out on X because I need to for work. Like, the news cycle is driven on there, and this is an administration. I mean, Elon Musk is yes. I'm on a reconnaissance mission, but not wearing a camo hat as I do it. But I see blatant clickbait, blatant lies all the time. And it's once the impressions are made and you see that count go, 1 million views, 2 million views, 3 million. I saw one the other day that had 14 million views. That was completely inaccurate. It
Okay.
just doesn't matter. And there are also no repercussions.
Earlier, and I didn't respond to this because it's just too true to warrant response, which is that you observed that we were kind of numb, come inauguration day 2025,
Yeah.
versus how, in 2027 or 2017, sorry, like the day after the election in 2016, where it was a lot of emotional outpouring and upheaval. But part of it is, I think we just now accept, uh, that we don't live in a world where there can be a kind of extra legal, extra jurisprudential justice, which is, I think, why people are so passionately relieved that the courts for now are working, in terms of issuing these injunctions and in these dissents and in issuing these judgments, really sort of calling the Trump administration out for things that would never have flown before him. They wouldn't have. I mean, they didn't have standing before, and they really don't have standing now. But now these judges are being like, "Come on! I mean, what are we doing here?
Right.
This is an insult to the entire history of the system, and to me as the person who has now got to make this decision." I think that, civilian truth telling, civilian mind changing, civilian empathy, um, individual people's ability to sort of say to a neighbor, I mean, I got 12 spreadsheets right here, and none of what you are saying, I read your Facebook post earlier, it's just not true. Can you correct it? Can you
But that's the fatigue that you were
that's what I
talking
yeah, I
about,
mean,
'cause
yeah.
I mean, I love being a Tracy Flick, and I'm kinda
We never
done
thought
with
of
the
you that way, but
spreadsheets,
I
like, I
can
do
see
it at
it.
work, and then I just wanna have a cocktail, right? And it's not that fun to have to sit there and say,
But
"No, well, that's not
Jesse,
actually what
that's
happened."
but you do it every day. I mean, that is
Yeah, but
part of
it's
what you're drawn into, right?
100%, but I think what you're speaking to, and this is reflected in the voting patterns, is that our circle got a lot more politically diverse than it
Mhm,
used to be,
mhm.
even if it's just our communities that we're part of because of immutable characteristics. I'm not necessarily like your close friend group
You're saying New
necessarily.
York is a lot redder than and Chicago's a lot redder than and Philadelphia's a
Or
lot redder
just
than
there are a lot more Latinos voting for Donald Trump. There are more
Mhm,
black
mhm,
men voting for
mhm,
Donald Trump. There
mhm.
are even more white women voting for Donald Trump. There are even more women of color. I mean, I've seen the charts out of the Times, right? With the arrows going in, the red arrows going in one direction and blue arrows going in the other direction. And there are only like 12 blue arrows, and they're all in the Atlanta metro area. So
Right.
yay, John
All
Ossoff. I
12 of
hope you
them?
can no, but tiny pockets, right, that this is happening in. And I I think that liberally minded people are doing a good job of acknowledging that this has happened, but the full reckoning of what this means is going to take years. And not to make this too much about politics, and I want you to also talk about what you're doing next. And we've run into your overtime. So I'm conscious of that. But I'm worried, at least from a political standpoint, that Democrats could do well in the midterms because historically that's what happens, right? And it's a referendum of the party in power, and will Band-Aid over the real wounds that we have by saying, well, the midterms went well. And that's kind of what happened with the 2022 midterms as well. We had the Dobbs decision and everybody turned out, right? Because that's something very difficult to grapple with, that your daughter has less rights than your mother had, like that, that's a real mind bender. But that from the political strategy point of view, that's something that really concerns me.
On your way to bringing up the midterms, you mentioned that we aren't really dealing with the actual thing that we need to be dealing with. And we have not been dealing with the actual thing this whole time. We're talking about 4 centuries of not dealing with the actual thing. We are so predisposed to keep moving on, even as we endorse the policies, politics, and culture of a person who really is just interested in dragging us back. I find it really fascinating this turn to the midterms every time something goes wrong for somebody in this country politically, with respect to the election, the presidential election. It tells me that we are never really going to be able to sit with and reckon with what is actually happening to us as a people, as a nation, what has been happening to us for several centuries, right? Um, we need not reckoning, but reconciliation. And it can take any number of forms. It can involve any number of constituencies. But we've never really sat down. And the Democrats, you can see the Democrats doing this right now as they dip a toe into reconciliation, as they consider what might have gone wrong in the 2024 presidential election, which, by the way, I think history is actually going to look back on in a somewhat favorable way with respect to Harris, because the facts are what they were, but culture is what changes, right? You'll always be able to look back on her saying democracy is at stake, also no tax on tips. Here's my affordable housing plan. We're going to build, build, build. I don't know what she could have done that would have been different, but we have hung it on a cultural issue, right? What are people saying that Kamala Harris did wrong? She didn't go on Joe Rogan. That is, I mean, I don't know if that's ultimately what people are going to say tanked it for, but that is the zone in which it gets boiled down to. She just didn't want to do Rogan.
Right. And she went on The View and said she wouldn't do anything different than Joe Biden. Those are the two.
Also didn't help. But another cultural zone, right?
100%.
I just don't know that we are really ready to sit in our shit, to look at all of the things that have led us to any number of points throughout the history of this country and say, whoa, we might want to reconsider what got us to this new precipice. I love that we have this thing called the debt ceiling, right? Because we always seem to find some new jack to like get it to go even
Wouldn't
higher.
it be great for our apartments if we actually could all have 14-foot ceilings?
Like, where is this ceiling? Like, whose ceiling is
Nowhere.
this? What a house does this ceiling like go in? I don't understand. When I hit a ceiling, I really hit a ceiling. I have to like put some ice on my head. These people, they just burst through it. They don't care. I mean, it's just all of this stuff is so imaginary and so conceptual that there never seem to really be repercussions for the ways in which the norms are flouted or the things that should make sense to do, like fix the debt. There are no repercussions for not doing it, really, to me.
Also, politicians and consultants have more than 9 lives, right? Like, they've got better than cats. And I'm noticing this. There's a flood of write-ups of what the Democratic apparatus is doing to fix it. We're spending $20 million to code switch to man or whatever, however we're supposed to be
Wait,
talking to
what?
men. It's in your own paper. This write-up of all of the consultants, a lot of them that advise the Biden campaign, the Harris campaign, the Hillary campaign, because we rarely see a new face unless it's coming in with kind of a renegade representative, right, who's from a different place or, whoever Bernie Sanders has in his orbit, right, is an outlier to all of this. But we're spending tens of millions of dollars in consultant cash to figure out if it was really about not going on Joe Rogan and who the Joe Rogan of the left is going to be. Their organizations
Right. Okay.
like
Yes, got it.
Chorus and right. So we continue to flush money when the answer is always, could you please be a normal human being? Right. Like, just think about the things that matter to you. And even if your delivery is a little strange or you've got something weird about you, people generally are okay with that. I mean, if you listen to Donald Trump, it's the strangest delivery you will ever encounter. No one could even script it, right? It's that
Those sentences
bonkers.
do not diagram at
No.
all.
And they vacillate between 4th grade level to maybe mid-college level, back down to 2nd grade. We are all over the map there. And people figure out what he's saying. Actually, they figure out multiple versions of what he's saying, which makes it palatable to multiple groups. But yeah, the hard work, the reconciliation of it, it has not begun in earnest. And part of that is the fear, the midtermitis, that this is coming and we have to be ready for that day. And we know that talking about tax cuts for the rich versus Medicaid cuts for those that really need their health care is the winning message. Republicans have been out to take away health care for decades. That never changes. They lose on it. They continue to go for it. But does that change the calculus of where we're going as political parties or as a country? Absolutely not.
I don't think it changed. No, I don't think so. But I also think that like people really want the thing that Donald Trump is offering up to a point, right? I mean, I think a lot about the opportunity that he had during the pandemic. The thing that I was most fascinated to see was the way he just does not understand people. Like, he understands audiences, but he doesn't understand people. And I think people didn't want to be an audience during the pandemic. They wanted to feel like people and they wanted a leader who was going to talk to them like people. And I think that if he had just come out and like been Bill Clinton or, Jimmy Carter, somebody who's just really good at at empathizing and just said, "Look, I mean, you guys, I got this thing too, and
And it
it
almost killed me.
sucks." Right? It sucks. It's really terrible. But instead, he turned it into an infomercial for ivermectin, right? And for bleach. I just think that I think that what people want, and I think the reason that he lost that election is because he couldn't do that during the pandemic, right? If he had just been
He
Andrew
would have
Cuomo,
won
if he had been
100%.
Andrew Cuomo just twice, he would have won that election pretty soundly.
Yeah.
I think. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what people say about the economy is important and the pocketbook issues. Yeah, sure, they're important. But we're now so thoroughly in a culture zone that it's really about like touching people in these intangible places that aren't their wallets or their bank accounts. It really is about these personality oriented and like interpersonal relationships. I mean, because that's a thing that Kamala Harris, theoretically lacked as a candidate, right? A human touch. And in lieu of that, Donald Trump had his ability to sort of communicate with mass audiences, which is as important as being able to like look a person in their eye and like tell them that they feel their pain. She did that a few times, and it was very powerful when it worked, but it just never caught on as a skill that she had.
No.
Um,
She was
so
nervous. She was
huh?
never not nervous, and he's, like, never
He's
nervous.
nerveless. He
Yeah,
has he
he's
has no
nerveless.
nerves. Yeah.
What's one issue that makes you rage, and one thing you think we should all calm down about?
I mean, this isn't really an issue, but I'm a big etiquette person. Um, and I live in New York City, which is a great zone to experience clashes in etiquette. And I am just going to be an old man and complain about people on escalators. It's
Okay.
very simple, everybody. Move over. There is a side to walk and a side to stand. And if you are standing in the walking side of the escalator, somebody is going to say something to you. And every once in a while, that person is going to be me. So I just don't know how you don't notice that people are like walking around you. Some people are on their phones. They don't really see. So I get
Not a great
really,
excuse, but yes.
yeah. I mean, I get really like my experience great rage at basic public cell phone use in general. I pull over when I need to use my phone. I'm not having a great relationship with my phone. I use it as little as humanly possible. But when I do use it and I'm out in public, I just step aside. Just get out of people's way. I can't walk and text because there's like phone speed. You can tell when somebody in front of you is on the phone. They're just
Yeah.
walking at an
And they
incomprehensible
stop.
rate. It's like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? What speed is this? This is not fast and it's not slow. It's just phone speed.
Should we just calm down about everything?
I think the Knicks people have to calm down a little bit.
Oh, good, because I had wanted to talk about the NBA with you.
I think that it's going to be fine one way or the other. I think we're learning something about everybody in New York City right now. I think we're learning something about this team, which is that they don't have the baggage that like 75-year-old Knicks fans do when they basically gave game one to Indiana. Um, and in record time too. I just like, just one of the most of the like an incredible night of sports, honestly. From in all the ways that sports are great, psychologically fascinating, culturally interesting. There was drama. There was like hip hop swag. There was history. There was so much awesomeness in that. And it was an MSG. Like
Yeah.
this, it
I
wouldn't
mean,
have been the
Reggie
same.
Miller on the call, Halliburton doing the choke a little prematurely and pulling it out in overtime. Yeah, it was
It
an
was
unbelievable sports night.
it was amazing that he did it when he did it, and they because he just knew. I think when you're a player, I'm a big tennis person. I mean, I am missing 2 tennis matches right now. I'm missing many tennis matches talking to you, but like
This is real
it's
commitment.
Roland Garros. It started 2 days ago, but it's just still the first round. Anyway, as a tennis fan, you get very used to opponents figuring out that the person they're playing, especially if you are playing a rival or you're playing a great player who's just having a bad day, and you have figured out a way. Daniil Medvedev is the king of this, right? He would get in players like great players' heads kind of unravel them a little bit. And I think Halliburton knew when they even got to an overtime, it was proof that, that's a wrap. We got this game. Even if they lose this series, this has been by far the grittiest, most impressive, most inspiring group of Knicks that this city has seen in a long time. This is such an important moment for this city's sports teams. I mean, the Yankees and the Mets, they looks like the World Series to me. I feel like, God willing, inshallah, keep the team together. They're going to win a championship if you can keep everybody together and bring in 3 more people. I don't know. This team can last. I think that New York is going to be fine. One way or the other is going to be fine. I say this on the eve of Game 5.
I like it. It's uplifting, and we always say that. Or what was that? It was from decades ago when Jerry Seinfeld was saying something like New York was finished for something, and he said, New York is never finished.
New York is never finished.
Oh,
never.
But we are finished, sadly.
Oh, my God.
Thank you so much for joining me. And you have a new podcast coming out. Do you want to plug that at all?
Yeah, it's called Cannonball. It's a culture show where I talk to people about art and culture and stuff. Like, I'd like to talk to my friend Eric, for instance, about Yankees facial hair, which is probably going to happen at some point.
Oh, and I think you're definitely the only person to have won a Pulitzer for a piece about a mustache, right? So facial hair is important.
I was convinced J.D. Vance was going to shave his beard off, by the way. He didn't do it.
Oh, I wasn't even in on thinking that.
I'm on a real beard watch with him. Not
like carbon ring
that
watch.
Is not a pun,
beard.
Everybody. I'm just watching his actual beard.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm deeply appreciative, and come see the girls soon and have the rest of the day.